Hey guys, tonight we travel back to a time and a town that both look deceptively quiet. You're standing in Hopewell, New Jersey, just a sleepy corner of the world in 1932, with gas street lamps, creaky porches, and a horizon that always smells faintly of pine. It feels like one of those places that never really wakes up or goes to sleep, just stays in a kind of polite, timeless daze. But tonight, you're walking up the long, gravel drive of a particular house at the top of a low hill. Colonial revival, big front porch, slate roof, the kind of place built to feel safe, expensive, unshakable. You'll hear wind in the branches, a screen door creak, and somewhere, in the deep walls of this house, the faint echo of a moment that shook the entire world. And yeah, spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this one emotionally. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to see where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take your first step onto the porch. It's dusk, and for a moment, everything feels just wrong. Not dangerous, not spooky, but like a song you're humming where one note keeps being slightly off. The doormat looks too new. The porch swing doesn't move, even with the breeze. The shutters are locked, not open, despite the hour. You step to the door, the still painted white. The brass knob gleams, and you enter. The house greets you like it's held its breath for 90 years. Inside, the silence is padded, almost respectful, like a museum but not proud. No plaques, no audio guide, just rooms frozen at a moment they were never supposed to hold. You walk down the central hallway. To the left, a small room with a fireplace. To the right, the dining room. Up the staircase, solid oak, creaking with each step, you find the nursery. This is where it begins. March 1st, 1932. This was where Charles Augustus Lindbergh Jr., 20 months old, was taken from his crib. No alarm, no warning, no witness, just gone. Mainstream fact: the Lindbergh kidnapping became the most famous crime of the 20th century. The infant son of America's greatest aviator vanished from his second-floor nursery, igniting a media frenzy that predated even the Kennedy assassination in intensity. You step into the room. The crib is still there. Pale wood. No blanket. Just a folded sheet. The window beside it, open just a crack. Your fingers brush the sill. A scuff mark along the edge. A footprint once documented in the original police report. And below, nothing but a soft thud of memory. Fringe tidbit: some say the entire nursery was built wrong, that it was placed too close to the outside edge of the house, that the window alignment was a known architectural risk, one that Lindbergh, paranoid about security, tried to hide behind locked shutters and alarms that were never turned on. Historians still argue whether Lindbergh's obsession with privacy created the perfect conditions for tragedy, or whether he suspected something even darker from the start. You walk around the room. The wallpaper, tiny blue flowers, is original, and somehow still fragrant. You don't know why, but there's a sharp scent in the air. Not floral, almost metallic. A rocking horse stands in the corner. Unused. A small bookshelf holds a half-dozen children's books, some German, some English. And beneath the window, the floor creaks differently. You kneel, lift the edge of the rug, and there it is, a nail, bent slightly outward, as if someone stepped there, hard, then turned, and left. You rise and look out the window. You can see the lawn below, and the gravel drive, empty. But once it wasn't. Once there was a ladder, and it wasn't broken yet. You stand there at the nursery window, fingers resting on the sill where the cool air drifts in, just enough to raise goosebumps on your arms. The view outside feels wrong. Not eerie, just out of proportion. Like the ground is too far below for a second-story window. You lean out slightly, and your brain starts to catch up to what your body already knows. There's no trellis, no balcony, no overhang. Nothing a person could climb easily. Yet someone did, or so they said. You turn around and let your eyes sweep the room again. This time not for charm but for logistics. The crib isn't under the window. It's off to the side. So why the window break-in? If someone entered here, they had to cross the room to get to the baby, then cross back. Riskier, slower. You walk over to the spot where the ladder once rested. It's not there now, of course, but you know the spot, down by the muddy flower bed. You head downstairs. The wood stairs groan in long, low complaints under your weight. Back outside, twilight is pressing in harder now. The air smells like wet leaves and some distant memory you don't want to unpack. You step off the porch and circle to the side of the house. There, you find yourself standing in the exact spot the police photographed in 1932. Two of the ladder's 3 sections were found twisted on the ground. The third, missing. You kneel. The soil's soft here even now, damp, like it remembers. You run your hand through the dirt and feel something smooth. A tiny splinter of aged wood. No way to prove what it was, but part of you knows. Mainstream fact? The infamous ladder left at the scene became a key piece of evidence. Its rungs were crudely made, hand-planed, and matched wood from Hauptmann's attic, a major point during his trial. But here's the catch. The ladder was awkward, heavy, and broken when found. Experts struggled to believe someone could carry a baby down it at all. Fringe tidbit? Some modern theorists believe the ladder wasn't used to enter, but to distract. That it was placed to look like a forced entry, while the real exit came from inside. Through the front door, or even carried by someone trusted. Historians still argue whether the ladder was ever meant to function, or if it was just an old-school misdirection. You step back, trying to picture it. Night, cold, wind rattling the shutters, someone hauling that ladder across the lawn, positioning it, climbing silently, and then descending again carrying a child. It doesn't make sense. The angle's wrong, the risk too high. You walk to the driveway, to the spot where the getaway car would have waited, if there ever was one. Tires would have left prints, but none were clear, just a few smudges in the mud. Another car might have parked down the road, headlights off, waiting. Or maybe there was no car. Maybe the person disappeared into the woods. You turn to look at the house. In the soft dark, its windows look like eyes. Not haunted, just tired, as if it's seen the story told wrong too many times. And then you hear it, a shuffle. Behind you, you spin, heart thudding. But there's no one, just the porch swing, gently moving. And on it, something you swear wasn't there before. A folded piece of paper. You approach slowly, unfold it. Inside, a perfect replica of the ransom note. Blocky handwriting, uneven lines. And those words, "Dear sir, have $50,000 ready." You stop reading, because you already know the rest. You step back, look toward the mailbox at the end of the drive, because that's where the original was found, crudely wedged in, just hours after the child vanished. Like the kidnapper had all the time in the world. You drift toward the old mailbox, the note still warm in your hand, though you know that's not possible. It feels like the paper is breathing, like the ink isn't quite dry. The kind of illusion that only happens when your nerves are sharper than your eyes, or when the past feels too close to the present. The mailbox is iron, cold to the touch even in spring. You open it slowly, half expecting something else to be inside. Another note, a photograph, a finger. Relax, it's empty. You glance back toward the porch swing. Still moving, still just swinging. No wind. Inside your coat pocket, the note pulses against your fingers. Dear sir, have $50,000 ready. Those were the first words of the first ransom letter. Found in the nursery, some claimed. Others said it appeared later in the mailbox just like this. It was written with near-manic block print, shaky in ways that felt intentional. As if the author wanted to sound foreign or wanted you to think they were. Mainstream fact? There were over a dozen ransom notes in the Lindbergh case, each more chillingly polite than the last. Phrases like, "We warn you for making anything public," and "We will hold the baby in a safe place," made headlines across the globe. But even in the 1930s, people noticed something strange. The notes didn't all look the same. Fringe tidbit? Some experts claimed the handwriting in the first letter didn't match the later ones. Others pointed to the odd tone, half businesslike, half sympathetic. One theory, that the letters came from multiple people or multiple groups, possibly even competing ones. Historians still argue whether the ransom trail was real, a hoax, or a cover-up for a much larger misdirection. You tuck the note away, turn back toward the house. Now you're looking at the second-floor window again, the nursery. From this angle, the whole break-in theory starts to look a lot more fragile. That ladder would have had to lean at an impossible angle, and someone would have had to climb in and out, silently, with a 20-month-old child in their arms. The word foolproof comes to mind, but not as a compliment. You head inside again, back to the parlor. You notice the phone mounted to the wall. Black, rotary, silent. That night in 1932, Charles Lindbergh placed the call to police from this very line. Except, he didn't call the police first. He called his friend, Colonel H. Norman Schwarzkopf Sr., head of the New Jersey State Police. Yeah, that name probably rings a bell. The local authorities were informed later. Why the delay? Lindbergh was a national hero after all, aviation royalty. Maybe he wanted to control the narrative. Or maybe he didn't trust local cops. Or maybe, just maybe, he knew more than he let on. You walk to the sideboard. There's a crystal decanter and a pair of glasses. One is clean. The other, lipstick stained. You freeze. Not because you think someone's here now, but because no photo you've ever seen of the Lindbergh house showed anyone living here with that kind of flair. Lindbergh's wife, and wasn't known for red lipstick. And the maid? Gone. Quit shortly after the funeral. You walk back to the nursery. The crib feels heavier in the dim light. There's something in the air here. Not sadness. Not horror. Intent. Something planned. The ransom notes didn't come all at once. They came in slow waves. First one, then a second, then more. Each time the price changed. Each time the location moved. The man who negotiated with the kidnappers was a retired schoolteacher named John Condon, but no one ever proved who sent him the letters. And when the baby wasn't returned, after weeks of waiting and money and wild goose chases, Condon said he met the kidnapper in person. He called him Cemetery John, because naturally they met in a cemetery. You blink. You're still standing in the nursery, but now it feels colder. You glance at the window again. It's open wider now. Did you leave it like that? You walk over, look down, and on the lawn, there's the ladder, again, leaning against the side of the house, even though you know it wasn't there before. And this time, there's a figure, just barely, at the edge of the woods, standing still, facing you, then turning, and disappearing. You don't run downstairs. You don't call out. You just move, slowly, like you're part of a dream that's only barely decided to keep you in it. Your feet find the stairs before your thoughts do, and with each step, the image clings to your mind. That figure at the edge of the woods, framed perfectly beneath the nursery window. You hit the bottom step. The door is already open, and the ladder? Gone. Not missing, just not there. You walk to the spot where you'd seen it. Kneel. Nothing but flattened grass. No impressions. No footprints. Just a quiet lawn trying very hard to forget what it's seen. You turn toward the woods. The same woods where, 2 months after the disappearance, the body was found. You hesitate at the tree line. It's not dark yet, but the shadows are working overtime. Thick trunks, low branches, that sweet sour smell of decay just barely noticeable when the wind shifts. You step in. Leaves crunch. Birds stop chirping. And then, silence. You move forward until you find it. A clearing. Not large, not marked. But if you stand in just the right spot and listen hard enough, you can almost hear the headlines screaming again. Infant's body found, badly decomposed, recognized by clothing. Mainstream fact? On May 12, 1932, the body of Charles Lindbergh Jr. was discovered partially buried near a roadside, less than 5 miles from the house. Cause of death? Massive head trauma. Official story? He died the same night he was taken. But, fringe tidbit? Some forensic examiners later questioned the timeline. The rate of decomposition didn't match the weather. The injury could have happened days or even weeks after the abduction. Some even doubted it was the Lindbergh baby at all. Historians still argue whether the child died immediately or lived long enough to become a bargaining chip for something bigger than money. You stand in the middle of the clearing. You don't want to, but you look down. There's nothing there now. Just moss and stones and a ring of trees that feel closer than they should be. You sit, because suddenly you're tired. Not body tired, soul tired. You wonder about the person who left the body here. What they were thinking. If they felt anything. If they stood in this very spot and watched the wind ruffle that tiny baby's hair one last time. You take a breath. Something shifts beneath your hand. You dig through leaves and find, of all things, a button. Plastic. Faded. With the letters C. L. etched in the back. You pocket it. Not because it proves anything, but because... what else do you do with something like that? You rise. And that's when you hear the whisper. Not speech. Paper. You turn. Against the trunk of a crooked oak. A small envelope flutters. Wedged in the bark like it grew there. You pull it free. Another note. The same blocky handwriting. Only this one says, "Don't believe the radio. Don't believe the court. Ask the maid." You blink. Ask the maid? The woman who'd only worked there a few months before the kidnapping? The one who found the crib empty? The one who was never seen again after 1936? You turn and head back toward the house. This story's nowhere near done twisting. Not even close. You're back at the house before you realize it. Drawn by some magnetism you're not even trying to fight anymore. The porch is still creaking gently, as if someone was just sitting there watching the woods. You push open the front door without thinking. The hinges don't groan this time. They welcome you. The parlor is still, but not silent. There's a noise. Faint. Muffled. Mechanical. You follow it. Into a side room you hadn't noticed before. A small study tucked behind the staircase, lined with shelves of dusty books and a typewriter that clicks once as you enter, like it had been mid-thought when you interrupted. You cross the room and spot a stack of carbon copies on the desk. Letters. Old. Yellowed. Typed in that same rigid, uneven hand. You pick one up. It's dated 2 weeks after the ransom was delivered. But the child had already been found by then. Dead. The letter says, "The baby is well. Do not let the newspapers poison your mind. We will return him when safe." You drop it. Because what? That's not part of the story you were taught. Mainstream fact? After weeks of back and forth through coded newspaper ads and private meetings, the Lindberghs delivered $50,000 in marked bills to an unknown man in a Bronx cemetery. The child was never returned. The letters didn't stop. Fringe tidbit? Some of the post-ransom notes claimed the baby was alive, weeks after he was supposedly dead. A few researchers believe those later letters were from a second group, possibly scammers, possibly not. Historians still argue whether those notes were part of the original plan or a chaotic aftermath fueled by desperation, lies, or even internal sabotage. You move to the next letter. This one's addressed to Dr. Condon, the teacher-turned-negotiator who got himself tangled deep into this mess. He'd placed a cryptic newspaper ad using the alias Jafsy. Why? Nobody really knows. Ego? Secrecy? Something worse? The letter references a meeting, a handoff, and the gentleman in the hat who smelled like ether. You pause. Ether. You suddenly remember there were rumors that the child had been sedated, that the kidnapper used chemicals, that the body had no signs of struggle. You check your pulse, no reason why, just something about that word. You set the letters down and leave the study. Head upstairs again. You need to see the nursery once more. But halfway up, you hear a thump. Soft, like something fell. You freeze. Then continue. At the top, the door is open. The window shut. The crib, empty, as always. Except now there's something tucked inside. A manila envelope. Your name on it. Okay, that's not even trying to be subtle anymore. You open it. Inside is a transcript. Typed. Labeled. Condon interrogation. March 1932. You skim it. Condon describing a nighttime meeting. He handed over the money. Got nothing in return. Said he heard a baby, but never saw one. Then something weird. The man told me, "You speak too much, teacher. Ask the maid instead." There it is again. The maid. Her name was Betty Gow, a Scottish immigrant. She was the one who put the baby to bed that night. The one who noticed him missing first. The one who was never charged. Never arrested. And yet, always lingering at the edges. You check the back of the envelope. One more message, handwritten in that same ransom-style scrawl. She left more than linens behind. You step into the hallway. Something is beginning to form here. A second layer. Not just of the story, but of the house. And now, you're part of it. Whether you meant to be or not. You drift down the hallway like you've walked it 1,000 times. The nursery fades behind you, but its silence clings to your shoulders. You pass by framed photographs on the wall. Sepia-toned faces staring blankly out, as if they've been waiting decades for someone to notice they're all turned slightly to the left. And then you find her room, Betty Gow's. The maid's quarters are tucked behind a narrow door near the rear staircase, barely large enough for a cot and a dresser. You step inside and the air changes. Cooler, stiller, like this room has stayed sealed longer than the others. A narrow window lets in slanted light. On the dresser, a silver brush and a cracked hand mirror. One of her shoes, just one, sits beneath the bed. And in the corner, folded neatly, a linen sheet with something embroidered. You lift the edge. Not a name, a phrase. Do not trust the voices in the trees. Your breath catches. That handwriting again. The same spindly block letters from the ransom note. So now the maid is leaving cryptic warnings in cross-stitch. Mainstream fact? Betty Gow remained a person of interest for years. Though never arrested, she was questioned repeatedly. She claimed she had no idea what happened to the baby. She left the Lindbergh service shortly after the funeral and returned to Scotland. Fringe tidbit? A diary surfaced in the 1970s. allegedly written by Gao's niece. In it, Betty reportedly confided that she believed someone inside the house had helped the kidnapper, and that she feared for her life if she ever spoke publicly. Historians still argue whether Betty Gao was an innocent bystander, an unwilling accomplice, or a witness silenced by fear. You sit on the bed, creaks loudly, like it resents your presence. There's something under the pillow. You reach. Another note. This one's not typed, not ransom style. It's scribbled in fast, panicked cursive. He came to the nursery before I left. I thought it was the father at first. You swallow hard, because that's not the version anyone printed. You fold the note carefully, slip it into your pocket. You need air. Back down the narrow stairs, through the kitchen, out the back door, and into the trees. You don't even question the pull this time. The woods feel thicker now, less like background, more like a character. You keep walking until the air shifts, cooler, familiar, and there, just like before, is the clearing. But it's different this time. There's something in the center, a small pile of stones, cairn-like, deliberate. Atop it, a child's shoe, brown leather, tiny, tied with twine. Your stomach drops, because you've seen a photo of this before. One of the earliest crime scene images, taken in the very clearing you now stand in. But this wasn't supposed to still exist. You crouch and pick up the shoe. Inside it, rolled tight, another message. He wasn't supposed to die. You stare at the words. No date, no signature, just that. A confession, a cry for help, a lie. You sit on a nearby log and look around. And you realize something. This isn't the first version of the story you've heard. It's not even the second. It's a palimpsest, layer over layer of story, each version trying to smother the one beneath. But nothing stays buried forever, especially not on a quiet street like this, especially not in a house built for secrets, especially not when a baby disappears and the world demands answers. Even if none of them are true, you don't remember standing up. One moment you're crouched by the cairn, holding a shoe that has no business still existing, and the next you're walking back toward the house. The trees feel closer now.
Taller.
Less forest, more cathedral. You half expect to hear organ music behind you. Instead, what you get is the soft crunch of something stepping on twigs, just out of sync with your own footsteps. You stop. It stops. You turn. Nothing. Of course. You reach the back door and slip inside, the house swallowing you again like it's been waiting, like it knew you'd be back. You head straight for the front parlor, because it's time to talk about him. Bruno Richard Hauptmann. You sit in the high-back chair by the cold fireplace. Close your eyes, and you're there. Hunterdon County Courthouse. January 1935. Flashbulbs. Men in hats. The scent of ink and nervous sweat. The so-called trial of the century. Mainstream fact? Bruno Hauptmann was arrested after a $10 bill from the Lindbergh ransom turned up at a gas station and was traced back to him. A search of his home uncovered over $14,000 in gold certificates hidden in his garage. The ladder wood matched planks in his attic. The handwriting claimed to be his. The jury deliberated just 11 hours before finding him guilty. Fringe tidbit: some of the evidence was shaky, questionable witnesses, no fingerprints on the ladder or the notes, and most of all, no clear motive. Hauptmann always insisted he was innocent, claiming the money belonged to a friend who had since died. And the ladder? He said he never built one. Historians still argue whether Hauptmann was the mastermind, a fall guy, or just the one unlucky enough to be holding the bag when the music stopped. You walk to the fireplace and lift the corner of the hearthrug. A loose floorboard. Of course. You pry it up. Underneath, 3 clippings from a 1935 newspaper, folded crisply. All 3 highlight the same quote from Hauptmann's trial. "I am innocent. I do not even know what this case is about." It reads oddly now, not desperate, detached, like someone reciting a line. You sit back. The room feels colder again. Not haunted, just heavy. You remember that Hauptmann never confessed, not even when he was offered a commuted sentence in exchange for a guilty plea. He held firm, right up until the night of April 3, 1936, when he was executed in the electric chair. No last words, no final admission, just silence. You stand, look up the stairs, back toward the nursery, and you remember another strange moment from the trial. The prosecution asked if Hauptmann had ever been to Hopewell. He said no. When asked why he had a map in his possession with a penciled circle around Hopewell, he answered, "I didn't draw that." You pause, because maybe he didn't. Maybe someone else wanted him to look guilty. Or maybe, just maybe, the story was built with enough gaps that anyone could be made to fit the outline. You go to the sideboard again. Pour yourself a splash of something from the dusty decanter. It smells like age and regret. You sip anyway, because honestly, at this point, you're not sure if you're still trying to solve a mystery or just living inside one. You leave the glass half full, or maybe half empty, depending on how much you trust your surroundings at this point. You step away from the parlor and move toward the front hallway, where the shadows stretch longer than they should. It's late now, or it feels late. Time in this house bends. You pause at the base of the stairs again, looking up toward the nursery. But you don't go there. Not yet. Instead, you reach for the coat closet near the door. Inside, a box. Plain. Wood. Locked. You try the knob. Clicks open without resistance, like it's been waiting just for your hands. Inside, documents, photocopies, an envelope labeled handwriting. You leaf through them, side-by-side comparisons of ransom letters and Hauptmann's own writing. Arrows, circles, lines dissecting every slant and curve of every letter, and one line scrawled in pencil across the top. Doesn't match. Still used. Mainstream fact? One of the pillars of Hauptmann's conviction was a handwriting expert who testified that he had no doubt the ransom letters were written by Hauptmann. But, ready for this? Fringe tidbit? Decades later, independent analysts pointed out inconsistencies. They argued that at least 3 different writing styles appeared across the ransom notes. Some suggested that the blocky, strange letters were deliberately stylized to look foreign, to seem uneducated, maybe even to mimic someone else entirely. Historians still argue whether the handwriting evidence was legitimate forensics or stage theater to calm a furious public. You pull out the last page in the envelope. It's a page from a composition book. A child's, probably, lines wide apart, but the message scrawled on it is adult. Angry. You believe a ladder told you the truth? You reread it. Again. Then again. Because it doesn't make sense until it does. You sit on the bottom stair and think about the ladder again. Built from wood matching Hauptmann's attic. Except that attic wood wasn't missing until after the police took samples. And the design of the ladder? Overcomplicated. Designed to look unstable. Almost performative. You reach into your coat pocket and pull out the button you found earlier in the woods. It still has C.L. scratched on the back. Charles Lindbergh, Jr. Except maybe it doesn't. What if those weren't his initials? What if it meant something else? A code name? A misdirection? A reminder of who this story was always supposed to be about? You go back into the kitchen. Not because you're hungry, but because it feels like something is waiting there. And it is. On the kitchen table, a small, leather-bound address book. It wasn't there before. You open it. Every page is blank except one. In the middle, Mrs. V. Sharp knows about the train station. You pause, because you know that name, or at least you've heard it whispered through the conspiracy fog. Mrs. Violet Sharp was a maid, not at the Lindbergh home, but at the Morrow estate and Lindbergh's family. She was questioned by police 4 times. On the 5th, she committed suicide. Mainstream fact? Sharp drank silver polish just before another scheduled interrogation. Authorities believed she was overwhelmed by stress. End of story. Fringe tidbit? Some researchers believe she was trying to protect someone, that she knew who came and went from the estate, that she may have seen someone on the day of the kidnapping. Historians still argue whether Violet Sharp was complicit in a crime, a keeper of secrets, or collateral damage in a story already spiraling out of control. You flip the book closed and tuck it under your arm. Another voice, silenced. Another thread, fraying. Another page in a story that doesn't add up. You walk back to the front door. Open it. The night air rushes in like a sigh. And just beyond the lawn, the ladder's back, perfectly upright, just waiting. You don't even flinch this time. The ladder standing out there like a relic or a dare, perfectly placed beneath the nursery window again, as if it's always been part of the architecture. You walk toward it slowly, not because you're afraid, but because you're finally done pretending not to see the pattern. Each time you question this story, the ladder reappears. Each time you get closer to something real, it's waiting for you. You reach out and touch the wood. Cold, splintered, unstable, yet rooted like a truth no one wanted to climb. Then something behind you moves. A car. No engine. Just the hush of tires on gravel. You turn. Nothing. Of course. You've been here long enough to know the house rewrites itself. But you're not the only one trying to edit this story. You head back inside and find the study again. The letters are still where you left them, spread across the desk like tarot cards. You grab a sheet of scrap paper and begin scribbling names. Bruno Hauptmann, John Condon, Betty Gow, Violet Sharp. And then, for the first time, you write this one down. Anna Hauptmann. Mainstream fact? After Bruno's execution, his wife Anna never stopped fighting to clear his name. For over 60 years, she filed appeals, gave interviews, and swore her husband was innocent. She died in 1994, still insisting he was framed. Fringe tidbit? Some believe Anna had documents never shown to the court. Secret letters, receipts, proof that the money found in their garage wasn't Bruno's. Others claim she protected someone, maybe even knew who really planned the kidnapping. Historians still argue whether Anna Hauptmann was blinded by love, or the last person alive who actually knew the truth. You stare at her name, underline it, and then write one more, and Morrow Lindbergh, because how many people talk about her? Not the aviator, not the public figure, the mother. She was home that night. She heard nothing, saw nothing, but later, in her journals, there were gaps, omissions. You find a copy of one such entry tucked between the ransom letters in the drawer, dated a week after the discovery of the body. I feel I am walking beside myself now. A stranger has taken my place and answers questions I can't understand. You read it 3 times. It's poetic, but it also sounds off, as if she knew her thoughts might be read one day and was trying to speak in code. You flip the page. One line is scribbled at the bottom in pencil. Never leave the baby near the window again. The word again hits you like cold water. Because what does it mean? Regret? A habit? Pattern? You take the journal, the ransom notes, the letters, every scrap, and spread them on the study floor. There's no crime scene tape. No detectives. Just you. And a timeline that never really lined up. You're trying to make sense of a story that was never designed to be solved. A baby gone. A ladder left behind. A nation that decided someone had to pay. Even if it was the wrong someone. You look at your list of names again. All ghosts now. All erased from the version people still tell. The nursery above you creaks. Not like footsteps, just pressure. Like the room is holding its breath. You step into the hallway and look up the stairs. You already know what's waiting, but it doesn't stop you from climbing. You climb slowly, your hand gliding over the railing polished by decades of hands before yours. But none of those hands belong to people who knew the whole truth. You're sure of it now. Every footstep feels heavier, not from the weight of your body, but from the density of unanswered questions pressing into the bones of the house. At the top of the stairs, the nursery door is ajar. Again, of course it is. You step in, expecting to find the crib, the ghost of moonlight on the wall, maybe a new note, maybe nothing. Instead, you see something much stranger. A circle, small, drawn in chalk on the hardwood floor, just beside the crib. Inside it, a penny, face up. You crouch, frown, pick it up. It's dated 1931. You turn it over. Someone scratched 3 initials into the back. BGM. You stare, because you've never seen those initials before. Or maybe you have, just not in that order. You sit on the floor, try to breathe, and that's when the thread starts unraveling faster than you can keep up. You think back to the files in the study, the inconsistencies, the eyewitnesses no one believed, the sightings in other states, the so-called tips that came in for years after the case was declared closed. Mainstream fact? The Lindbergh case had more than 200 suspects at one point. Some were credible, most weren't, but the world needed a villain, and Bruno Hauptmann was close enough. Fringe tidbit? A 1948 FBI memo, later released under the Freedom of Information Act, claimed a nursemaid matching Betty Gau's description was spotted in Buenos Aires with a toddler resembling Charles Jr., 2 years after the crime. Historians still argue whether that sighting was real, mistaken identity, or one more fantasy in a case bloated with delusions. You pocket the penny, and then you remember something else. There were rumors, never confirmed, that Charles Lindbergh himself interfered with the investigation, that he refused help from the FBI, that he moved the baby's body before police arrived. You shake your head, because if that's true, then this wasn't just a kidnapping. It was a cover-up. But who was being protected? And why? You open the nursery closet. Inside, it's just coats, tiny ones, but in the back, there's something else. A trapdoor. You didn't see it before. You crouch, lift it. A narrow staircase spirals down, farther than the first floor. You glance behind you once, then step inside. The air turns to stone. You're underground now. Not quite a cellar, not quite a tunnel. Somewhere between. The walls are lined with shelves. And the shelves? Jars. Dozens of them. Inside each, a single object. Pacifier. A key. A comb. A tooth. Each labeled in identical script. Dates. Times. Names. You find one labeled Condon. Inside, a gold cufflink. Another, Sharp. A matchbook from the Morrow estate. You don't know what this place is, only that it was never meant to be found. You walk deeper, and at the end of the corridor, a wall of framed photos. People you've heard of, people you haven't. Every one of them connected somehow to the case. At the center, a baby. The photograph is black and white. The baby is laughing, but the label beneath? Unidentified male infant, found April 1932. Not Charles Jr., just unidentified. You turn away, stunned. Because maybe that's the worst part of all this. Not that someone died. Not even that someone got away with it. But that after all this time, after all these stories, no one can say for sure who was in that crib. You don't want to look back at the photograph, but you do. Of course you do. Because something in your chest refuses to let this go. The idea that the most famous baby in America might not have been the baby they buried. It reshapes the entire house. The nursery, the ladder, the ransom. It all twists into something crueler. Stranger. You step back from the wall of faces. Every portrait seems to follow you now. Not in a spooky, haunted house kind of way, more like a disappointed jury. You walk the length of the tunnel again. Jar labels blurring in your periphery. Names, dates, objects. Someone's private ledger of the unspeakable. You find a narrow staircase on the far side and climb until you're in a tiny room you don't remember being above. Maybe it's in the attic. Or maybe the house just made a new room for you. There's a desk, typewriter, a single sheet in the roller. You read it. You keep looking for the end of the story, but there isn't one. Below it, another sentence in that ransom letter scrawl. The baby woke up. That was the problem. You exhale, sit, stare at the sheet until your eyes blur. Mainstream fact? During the trial, the prosecution insisted the child had been taken while asleep and never awoke. No struggle, no noise, but whispers persisted. That there were scratches on the windowsill. That a child's cry had been heard and silenced too fast. Fringe tidbit? Some researchers claim there was a second autopsy. One not filed publicly. One suggesting the child died hours later than originally believed. And not from blunt force trauma, but suffocation. Historians still argue whether the cause of death was real, redacted, or rewritten entirely to protect someone too powerful to name. You look at the window across the room. It's nailed shut, yet cold air seeps through the frame, as if the house is breathing. You find a leather-bound folder on the desk. Inside, blueprints, not for the house, for the ladder, hand-drawn, detailed, initialed at the bottom. CL. Your heart stumbles. Not because of what it might mean, but because it forces you to ask something unthinkable. What if Lindbergh built the ladder? Not used it, necessarily, but built it. Why would he? Was it part of a hoax? An elaborate ruse that spiraled out of control? Or something darker? You open a drawer. Find a newspaper clipping, folded into quarters. It's brittle and yellowed. Lindbergh house renovations to begin 1931. The article describes structural work, window framing, balcony removal. You read it 3 times before you see it. And Mr. Lindbergh himself requested the nursery window remain unaltered, even as the rest of the exterior was modernized. Why keep the window? Why only that? You glance around the attic room. There's nothing left to say here. The typewriter keys click once, by themselves. You back away fast. The house is watching now. You descend back to the hallway, hands skimming the wallpaper for balance. The portraits shift as you pass. Not changing expressions, just angling slightly toward you. You reach the parlor again. Feels different now. Dimmer, like it remembers things you shouldn't. You pour another inch of whatever's in the decanter and down it in one go. Because there's something else you haven't faced yet. The suitcase. You didn't notice it before, but it's there now by the front door. Worn, latched. A faded luggage tag dangles from the handle. You flip it over. Property of C. Lindbergh. Inside, tiny baby shoes. Receipts. A diary. The first entry reads, I told her we'd be safe if we followed the plan. You close the suitcase with trembling fingers, because you're starting to wonder, what if the plan wasn't to kidnap the baby? What if the plan was something far more complicated? Something no one was ever meant to understand? You sit on the stairs again, the suitcase at your feet, the room around you pulsing with quiet dread. You can hear the house settling above you, wood creaking, air shifting, but none of it sounds random anymore. It's like the walls themselves are waiting to see what you'll do next. You flip open the suitcase again, hands more confident this time. The diary's binding is cracked, its pages curled inward like they've been shielding secrets too long. You turn to the next entry. We rehearsed it once. The ladder worked. The timing didn't. You stop reading, because that isn't desperation. It's logistics, planning. You turn to the third page. There's a sketch of the window, annotated with exact dimensions, almost architectural. The handwriting isn't panicked. It's precise. You think back to the trial, the headlines, the photos of the crude ladder leaned against the nursery. Mainstream fact? The prosecution argued the ladder was hastily built by a carpenter working alone, its structure so unstable it broke during use. But fringe researchers noted something odd. It was over-engineered in parts. The angles suggested someone with training. The balance implied prior testing. Fringe tidbit? An early investigator claimed, quietly, that the ladder had been used before. Not on the night of the kidnapping, but weeks earlier. Maybe as a dry run. Maybe for something else. Historians still argue whether the ladder was evidence of a spontaneous crime or the echo of something scripted long before it began. You close the diary and check the lining of the suitcase. There's something sewn into the fabric. You cut the threads loose and pull out a black and white photograph. A train station. And in the corner, barely visible, a woman pushing a pram. She's wearing a hat. And her face, it's blurry, but not unfamiliar. You turn the photo over. March 3rd, 1932. Newark Station. She didn't want to leave him. You exhale. Because wait, March 3rd? That's after the baby was taken. If this photo is real, then either someone lied about the date, or someone lied about everything. You scan the photo again. That platform. That train number. You remember something. An unconfirmed tip from a train conductor. A woman with a baby boarded a southbound train late at night, just days after the abduction. The conductor tried to report it, but the timeline didn't fit the official story, so he was ignored. You pull out the ransom notes again. Look at them with fresh eyes. They're childlike, misspelled, disjointed, but consistent. Too consistent. As if the mistakes were rehearsed, manufactured. You look up and say it aloud because the house needs to hear it too. What if the ransom wasn't to get the baby back, but to keep him away? And in that silence, you hear something drop upstairs. Not fall. Drop. Deliberate. You bolt up the stairs. Faster now. The house groaning with every step. The nursery door swings open as you approach. Inside, on the crib mattress, sits a rattle. Metal. Unfamiliar. You pick it up. It's cold. Freezing, actually. And etched with letters that don't make sense until you tilt it toward the light. To CJL for silence. You close your eyes. Who gives a baby a rattle meant to silence? Who signs it like a threat disguised as a gift? You remember Lindbergh's obsession with order. His belief in eugenics, his love of flight, his absence during key moments, his silence after. You open the nursery window. The ladder's gone again, just like that. But down in the grass, faint and sure, are footprints. Small, like a child's, but going away from the house. You turn back toward the room and feel something shift. This wasn't just a crime. It was a performance. And the audience? You, the press, the police, everyone watched the version we were told to see. But the baby? He wasn't asleep. He woke up. And that ruined everything. You don't go back downstairs right away. You stand in the nursery, holding that rattle like it's radioactive, your breath fogging up the window. The footprints on the lawn below stay still, but your heart doesn't. Because now you know you haven't been following a trail of clues. You've been following a misdirection. Every note, every photo, every version, all designed to keep you in the wrong room at the wrong time. You pocket the rattle, step back, and scan the nursery again. This time, you're not looking for signs of a struggle. You're looking for design, something staged, something intentional, and you find it. A single nail sticking out from under the crib, bent sideways. You crouch, lift the crib skirt, and reach beneath. Piece of paper carefully folded. You tug it out. He never wanted a second child. That was the problem. No signature. You sit back on your heels, and everything tilts. Because now you're not looking at a kidnapping. You're looking at a family drama played out on a national stage. A man revered by millions whose son became a symbol, a legend, but also a burden. You think about, and again, her journals, her silence. You think about how often women were told to smile through grief, to accept that their stories weren't theirs to control. Mainstream fact: after the death of their firstborn, the Lindberghs had 5 more children. Charles became increasingly distant, eventually moving much of his life to Europe. Fringe tidbit: one of their children later claimed the family never truly recovered from the tragedy, that the shadow of the baby was always there, unspeakable but all-consuming. Historians still argue whether the Lindberghs mourned privately or hid something publicly. You walk out of the nursery and into the hallway. The house feels closer now, like it's leaned in to hear better. At the end of the corridor, a door you haven't noticed before. Narrow, almost camouflaged into the wall paneling. You try the knob. It opens into a small room with nothing but a wooden writing desk and a single, flickering light bulb hanging from a wire. On the desk, passport, dusty, and used. Name: Charles Augustus Lindbergh, Jr. Issued 1931. Inside, all the fields are filled in. Height: 2 feet, 9 inches. Hair: blonde. Eyes: blue. Then something strange. A page near the back has fresh ink. An arrival stamp. Buenos Aires. Date: 1933. You sit down hard. The timeline doesn't work. Can't. The baby was declared dead in 1932. And yet, here's proof, official proof. He arrived in Argentina a year later. You flip to the back cover. There's a small photo tucked in. Toddler grinning. You stare at it, then shake your head, because it looks like him. But how would anyone know? The baby had barely turned 2 when he vanished. And if he had a twin or a body double or someone else's baby filled that coffin, then maybe the question isn't who took the baby, it's which baby did they take? You stand up, because it's too much now. Too many versions, none of them verifiable. You close the passport and walk back out. You hear the front door open downstairs. No footsteps, just air. You lean over the stairwell railing. No one, of course. You make your way down anyway, gripping the rail like it's the only real thing left. In the foyer, a breeze curls around your ankles. The door is open. Outside, nothing, except the soft imprint of one last footprint in the dirt. Small, barefoot, headed toward the woods. You don't follow, because this time, you finally understand. This story doesn't want to be solved. It just wants to be told, again and again, until you forget which version you started with. You close the door behind you quietly, not to keep anything out, but to keep something in. The air inside the house still feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for you to say what you've now seen with your own eyes. But there's no speech for this. There's only the slow hum of doubt, winding its way around your ribs like a tightening vine. You head back toward the parlor, but stop at the mantelpiece instead. There's a small clock there, not ticking. You lift it, heavy, unwind the key, ticks once, then stops. The hands are set to 9:44, the official time, and reported noticing the baby was gone. But what if she noticed earlier, or later, or not at all? You pull back the frame of the clock. Inside, tucked like a secret, a scrap of telegram paper. The print is smudged. You read the words anyway. Drove south as planned. He asleep. Train holds. You sit. Because that's not a ransom note. That's a status update. A checkpoint. And suddenly, the fog around motive begins to thin. Mainstream fact? The accepted theory has always been simple. The baby was taken for ransom, died in the process, and the culprit was caught, tried, and executed. But fringe thinkers always argued that the timing didn't fit, that the gold certificates took too long to surface, that the ransom exchange didn't follow the usual patterns of other kidnappings. Fringe tidbit? At least 2 private investigators hired by the Lindbergh family disagreed on the motive. One suspected political enemies. The other suspected a family arrangement gone sideways. Neither published their final reports. Historians still argue whether the baby was truly taken for money or moved to disappear permanently. You go back to your notes. All the fragments you've pieced together like a ransom collage of your own. The latter may have been built in advance. The ransom notes written by someone who was no stranger to the family. The child's body, perhaps not the one people believed it to be. And now, this telegram suggesting transportation, not chaos. You grab the decanter again. Because here's the real problem. You're starting to think there wasn't one motive. There were 3. First, the public motive, a crime of greed. A story that made sense to people desperate to make sense of anything. Second, the private motive, a family unraveling. A child who may have been inconvenient for reasons no one dared speak aloud. And third, the one no one talks about, the one that stretches into legacy and power. Because if you were Charles Lindbergh, the most admired man in the world, what would you do if something unthinkable happened? You'd hide it. You'd rewrite it. You'd turn the unspeakable into something noble. Or tragic. Or poetic. Anything but real. You return to the sideboard and open the lowest drawer. Inside, a thick envelope labeled, "For when it's quiet." You open it. Newspaper clippings. Not from 1932. From the 1950s, 60s, 80s. Every one about sightings of a man in South America with an uncanny resemblance to Charles Lindbergh Jr. He's always described the same way: blonde, tall, quiet, keeps to himself, and always gone before anyone gets a second look. One article has a handwritten note scribbled in the margin. They're not seeing ghosts, they're seeing guilt. You stare at the line, because that's the most honest thing in this house. You look around the room, which suddenly feels too sharp. The shadows are no longer soft. They're corners. The floorboards don't creak. They press back. And you realize this story has trapped you, not just with questions, but with wanting the answers. That's the final trick. The real locked room wasn't the nursery. It was your brain, your hunger for truth, your need for neat endings. But the house, it only gives you pieces. And the one thing it will never give you is closure. You sit back down on the parlor floor, surrounded by paper and silence. There's nothing left to find, not really, but your hands keep moving, shuffling clippings, refolding maps. You're not looking for the final clue anymore. You're just trying to slow the spin. The story's done with you, but you're not done with it. You glance at the photo again, the one with the blurred woman and the baby stroller on the train platform. The way she turns her head slightly, as if hearing something no one else did. And you wonder, was that the last time someone looked at that child and knew exactly who he was? You trace the edge of the rattle in your pocket. The words still etched clearly. For silence. Mainstream fact? Charles Lindbergh continued to live a very public life. Awards, books, controversies. He advocated for aviation and conservation and was buried in Hawaii after his death in 1974. Fringe tidbit? Decades after his death, it emerged that he had fathered several children in Germany with 3 different women, none of whom his American family knew about. These were hidden lives, carefully orchestrated. Historians still argue whether that impulse for secrecy began long before Europe. Maybe, just maybe, it started with one devastating night in New Jersey. You walk the house one last time. The nursery is quiet, the study untouched, the trapdoor in the closet, gone, vanished like it was never there. You descend the stairs, knowing it's time to leave. But before you do, you glance one last time at the family photo on the mantel. Lindbergh, Anne, and Charles Jr. 3 figures frozen in time. But in the image, the baby's face has started to fade. You blink. No, it's just your imagination. Probably. The front door opens smoothly now. No creak, no wind. Just stillness. You step outside. The yard is the same as when you arrived. Perfectly cut. Too neat. But you glance at the window high above, where the ladder once stood. And for a moment, just a flicker, you think you see a face in the glass. But it's not looking out. It's watching you. Because maybe that's the final truth here. The story didn't want to be solved. It wanted to survive. And in that, it succeeded. And now you let your breath slow. You've stepped outside the house, but the air still feels thick with all the things left unsaid. The grass beneath your feet softens. The sky above dims. The wind no longer carries questions, only sleep. You walk down the quiet street where it all began, where a single ladder once leaned and a nation's heartbeat skipped. That calm New Jersey lane fades gently behind you. The secrets, for now, stay right where they want to be. You're safe now. You've done what you came here to do. You followed the noise into the silence. And maybe that's enough. Let the rattle stay in your pocket. Let the name rest on the shelf. And let your mind loosen its grip on every impossible thread. Close your eyes. There's nothing chasing you anymore. Only sleep. Only stillness. Only quiet.